Okay, hi everybody. My name is Eric Brown. I work at BitTiger, and tonight we are happy to have Vivian Xu and Siwei Shen give a presentation about Lyft, especially their new product, Shuttle, what it's like to work at Lyft, and answer some questions after their presentation. I'm going to begin the presentation tonight by going over BitTiger. Please bear with me, and we will start with the Lyft Tech Talk shortly. Thank you so much. So BitTiger is the Silicon Valley lifelong learning platform. We make learning better, faster, and more effective. Our vision is to excel at providing a world-class education experience to the next generation of engineers. And this is done by improving the effectiveness of learning and helping students achieve their professional goals. Our goal is to create a lifelong learning platform to build a community that reaches over 1 billion people. BitTiger's three core products are its open resources, the North America Career Acceleration Service, and the Mastery Program Services. Open resources include talks with Silicon Valley professionals that cover topics like tech breakthroughs, career advice and consultation, workplace experiences, the road to management, future trends, thought leadership. And that we have a YouTube channel as well. If you find our YouTube channel, go to youtube.com and type in BitTiger. You'll be able to see new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So check it out, subscribe, and see those new videos every week. Our BitTiger Mastery Programs are 3 months of project-based training in open source technologies to help you get the offer you desire. Core technologies explained, plus Silicon Valley quality projects are able to improve your skills to the professional level. We have top teachers and teacher assistants that teach manageable curriculums and offer customized learning programs. Frequently asked interview questions are explained and practiced to improve your chances and put you in the driver's seat of your own career path. So for tonight, I have a few announcements to get started. The application form for positions at Lyft, which will be both internship and new grad positions, will be released tomorrow, October 18th at 8 a.m. U.S. Pacific time to all attendees, and will close next Tuesday, October 24th at 10 a.m. U.S. Pacific time. This timeline will also be laid out in the email that I will send tomorrow to all attendees. So please give yourself enough time to fill out the application form. It should be very quick, but make sure you do it before next Tuesday. Questions. We are going to hold the questions. We're not going to answer any direct questions until the end of the presentation, and we will ask you kindly to please fill out the polls. This will help us design better content for you in the future and help us as we grow. Thank you so much. Tonight we have Vivian Xu, Engineering Manager on Shuttle at Lyft, and Siwei Shen, Director of Platform Engineering at Lyft. And they will be going over the Shuttle product at Lyft and what it's like to be an engineer at Lyft, and what are some good advice to start your career. The Lyft Tech Talk will begin shortly, so please be patient, and we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much. Okay, Siwei, if you could go ahead and share your screen, and you can I just unmuted you, and you can go ahead and get started. You can share your screen over mine. I think it should take over. Perfect.
All right.
Great.
So hopefully folks can see us as well. So I'm Siwei here. This is Vivian. All right, so we're gonna get started. I will hand it over to Vivian first. She's actually gonna give a quick overview of the Shuttle product.
Okay. Hi everyone. This is Vivian from Lyft. It's my honor to be here and present our latest product innovation to everyone in the audience here. I guess I'll just start presenting, right?
Yeah, you can.
You share the whole screen. That's right.
Can people still see the slides?
Can people see the slide?
You should be able to see it okay, yeah.
Okay,
Alright,
cool.
Looks good.
Okay, great. Cool. I'll just spend the 30 seconds about myself. I graduated from Zhejiang University in China and Simon Fraser in Canada. And I spent 2 years in Microsoft, 5 years at Twitter, specifically on the revenue product. And after that, I'm here at Lyft. This is my 6 months within Lyft, so relatively new, but super excited to be here building this new product of Shuttle. So I guess I'll start with the birth story of Shuttle, since this is not so interactive, but I'll just go with my flow. And if folks have any questions, I guess we'll go over that.
So is there a way for people to actually ask questions live, Eric?
Yes, there is. They are actually asking questions now through the Q&A at the bottom. You'll see a few buttons there. One of them is Q&A, and they'll be asking questions. Would you like to answer questions live?
I think Vivian might prefer that. Let's
Okay.
pull up the...
Okay, cool. So I would like to step back a little bit and talk about Lyft's mission. Many people know us as a ride platform, but not necessarily know what we're here as a company. So Lyft's general mission is try to improve people's lives with the words of best transportation. Transportation covers a lot more than what we currently offer. So the mission is definitely much bigger. So how do we improve lives? There's 3 different aspects we look at the big mission part. We wanted to make the experience social. We wanted the platform to be economically make sense. We are also very environmental aware. So then, being green help the environmental aspect. Now, how do we define the words best transportation? The best transportation experience also means it has to be reliable, affordable for the passengers, and the experience has to be delight in terms of the interaction with other passengers, as well as interaction with drivers. So with all of those content, we believe share the rides is the answer to answer those questions or to fulfill our mission. People usually know share the rides in the product form of Line. I would assume everyone in the audience knows Line very well, which is a dynamic and affordable share the rides option. And specifically, when you request a ride, you could potentially get matched with people who are along the same route or going to the same direction. And we basically pick up multiple people along the way, and you're sharing a ride with other people. And then the fare is typically cheaper than a classic ride. So the product of Line is the very first innovation we've had for share the rides. It was launched in 2014. It's now operating in 16 cities. Covers the whole covers 40% in those markets where we offer Line. So it's a pretty successful product, very well adopted in those markets where we offer it. So now Shuttle is basically, you can think of Shuttle as a twist of Line. Specifically, it is a service that we're aiming for providing an affordable and a reliable commuting solution. So it's very specific for commuting. It was launched in March this year, so it hasn't been long live in the market. We're currently operating in 2 cities, San Francisco and Chicago. And I would call it more or less as a beta because the coverage in those 2 cities are still limited. I'll explain a little bit more like why we started very small.
I think there's the first question here that's relevant to Vivian's part. Line is like a carpool.
Yes, more or less very similar. Line is like a carpool. Very similar. Uber's competing product is Uber Pool, basically. Oh, actually, sorry. I think I misunderstood. It's not really, I don't know what you mean by carpool rig, but it's very similar to Uber Pool. Yes, Uber Pool. Someone else asked a really good question about, so it's like a bus. I'll get to that later. So specifically how Shuttle works is it's shared rides. We have those fixed stop, designated stop. The fare, the price that you pay is fixed, so we don't incorporate the prime time. We pick the routes that's more efficient, more direct, and we have the ability, or we encourage people to do scheduling with Shuttle. Now, same question many people would have is, wait, isn't this just a bus? How is this different from bus? I have this snapshot of a screenshot of a tweet that was posted actually right after some of the criticizes about or comments about Shuttle being like a bus. Basically, in this tweet, you see this bus running to the building, but one of the comments says, "Wow, Lyft Shuttle wouldn't have done that." It's more of a joke, but I guess essentially Shuttle is slightly different from bus, or we're not really trying to compete with public transportation options like bus. I quoted a article from one of our senior director of transportation policy, Amy. So she says it very well. So what Shuttle is doing is not just reinventing bus, but we're offering this flexible microtransit service, bringing additional capability into the system where and when it needed the most. For example, we wanted to help close the last mile gap. We want to deliver the right size, the mobility service in an underserved community, and we wanted to supplementing the crowded public transportation facilities. So once again, we're not trying to direct competing with public transportation, but we'd really aim to supplement it and use a much more dynamic service to do that. Someone asked a medium-size self-driving car. It's very interesting you bring up self-driving car. As today, we use normal Lyft driver pool, but as you can see in future, when self-driving car is much more available, we could incorporate something like this on services like this very easily.
Yeah, I just want to add, we do see a lot of questions about like positions or how to apply. We are not ignoring those questions. We actually want to leave that to the second part. So for now, Vivian is only going to pick questions that's relevant to the Shuttle service.
So questions are coming in faster speed than what I can digest as I speak. So if I miss any question, feel free to bring up again later in Q&A. Okay, so I briefly explained Shuttle, and I want to go over or spend more time on how we're still building Shuttle, how we're building it. So high level, how is this team composed? We have a dedicated engineer team, which covers backend, mobile, and web. We have a dedicated QA, product manager, data scientist, analyst, designer, and business op. So it's a fully independently functioning team that's dedicated to this product. Okay, sorry. Going back, someone on the audience asked, can you explain more in detail how Shuttle is different from Line? I'll go back to the previous slides, which is very important, and set up the context. So Line is more door-to-door. So as you request, your car showed up at your door. And the price is not necessarily fixed. It's dynamic price based on distance, time, and the demand at that point. There's no concept of walking. So it's a much more on-demand, door-to-door experience. Whereas Shuttle, we have designated a stop, legal, valid stop. And I guess on high level, it's aiming for solving the commuting solution, which could be potentially very different from like generic use cases or transportation use cases. Okay, so I hope everyone in the audience understand it better what Shuttle is now, but I would wanted to talk about like where does the efficiency coming from? Shuttle is priced cheaper than Line, or pretty cheap at this point, but we believe it is a, oh, okay. We believe we will be able to gain efficiency with the way that we operate. Where does the efficiency coming from? We wanted to operate in a place where it has decent volume. We are working on matching optimization, making matching more efficient within this particular constraint. We ask people to walk to a designated stop, so then it's much easier to be matched and less time devoted in dropping off at different place or pick up at different place. We have this concept called batching. And what batching means is we try to push people towards the same time. So it's less flexible, but we'll gain efficiency in this way. So you can think of something along the line of bus schedule, but obviously we can change the schedule to be much more dynamic, depends on the volume of the route. And internally, we have this metrics called match efficiency, which measures how efficient a ride is. High level, it's basically defined with the percentage of the overlap of the route between or across all those passengers on their ride. So high level, you can think if 2 persons are exactly on the same pickup and same drop off, then their match efficiency is the percentage of the overlap divided by the total cost. So in that case, it will be, for 2 persons, it will be 50%. If that makes sense. I'll quickly jump into one of the questions that someone asked, where did you get all those shuttles? Once again, the way shuttle operates today is leveraging existing driver pools. So we're not having a designated shuttle driver or shuttle vehicle. Obviously, in future, we foresee if there is like enough density, particularly being built up around a specific route, we could operate in a more efficient way with designated shuttle. And someone asked Via. That's a very good question. Via is a almost competing product, specifically operating in New York and Chicago. We pay close attention to that. And then there's another question about what kind of consumer are you targeting group for shuttle? Bring back again, specifically, we're aiming for those commuters. So shuttle today operates specifically during commute hour. So, and we're really trying to create this repeating behavior on Lyft that people keeps coming back and take shuttle. Maybe I'll move forward, and then some of the questions is very interesting, but I get to cover that towards the end or later part of the presentation. So we'll go back if my second part of the presentation doesn't answer some of those questions. All right, so some people already have questions about how do we decide the stop? Similarly, how do we generate those routes? Routes composed with the direction and also the stops. So that's the most key part of this shuttle product, as you can imagine. A efficient route, a good route means we can operate much more efficiently. This is a part where a lot of data scientists, machine learning analyst thinking is devoted into. So I'll explain very, very high level, and it's obviously is in a very fast iteration stage. So what I'm talking about now might not be the truth as of today, but things are very quickly being iterated. So when we started with shuttle, we started with pilot. So we basically grab all those or look at all the employee demand where their work and home addresses, and we basically create clusters. You can think of the simpler term of K-medium clustering of those home and work locations. That's one dimension of the data. Other data sources are consensus data, so publicly available information about generally where do people live and where do people work. And OpenStreetMap data to look at how, if it's one-way street, then we probably don't want to go the other way or have the driver to drive the opposite way, which doesn't make sense. Or this is like not legal to stop. And then internal Lyft data, we have a lot of data about our customer or passengers commuting behavior. So you can think about basically strict down only to look at commuting data and where are people requesting and where are people getting drop off, and use this clustering way to curate this route. And I think someone in the audience asked, how do we pick those stops? So what I described here basically reflects a density of a particular high-level route, but how do we pick the exact stop is a little bit trickier than this. In order for us to operate efficiently, we have to pick the most legal stop. So it cannot be red curb, it cannot be by a bus stop. How do we get that? Right now, it's a little bit manual. We rely on some of the open data source. We use Google Map for operationally to check if there's a bus stop there. And the last vetting is we actually send drivers. So we had a list of lat and long locations, and we leverage the drivers to go and check physically if the stop is legal or not, and then give us feedback. And we have those vetted stop within San Francisco, downtown, and Chicago. Obviously, you can think of in future when we have the right infrastructure, we could leverage a lot of computer vision technology to automate this and truly scale this and get a much more clean and real-time data. We also actually incorporate some of the real-time data in terms of passenger behaviors. So if passenger gets to contact with the driver more, for example, that's a sign that this stop might not be the best stop. The pickup experience could be bad. And then we have data to look into, investigate, is this a good stop or not? And then address those manually. Someone asked, are the routes dynamic and updated in real time? It is not, and it is by design that the route are not dynamic and not real time being updated, because this is a solution for commute. So we wanted people to form this repeating behavior by coming back to the service, and consistency is very important in this part of the story. So we can, in fact, we're trying to, for example, if we wanted to move a stop from one corner to another, and people are already used to going to this exact stop every single day for the past months, moving it to another corner actually causes confusion. So we're building the mechanism to better notify passengers when their stop are being changed. So yeah, it's not dynamic. All right. So the next topic I wanted to cover is how do we innovate on an existing platform? I think this is something that I saw a lot more, or have a lot of more thinking for the past 6 months joining Lyft. Lyft is already a well-known brand. We have the existing platform in terms of drivers and passengers. Technically, we also have a lot of existing infrastructure being built in terms of data storage, in terms of data streaming pipelines. This is a part that, Shuttle is a very new product, and we want to use this product to innovate, building up the new features that other product has not even had in this market. So how do we innovate? How do we innovate on an existing platform? What are the challenges? What are the benefit? So the way I see it is the leverage is we can, on an existing platform, it's very easy for us to establish or use or leverage the existing established passengers and drivers. Some of the audience asked about drivers, and in our contact, as a bootstrap, we actually did not think a lot about how do we acquire drivers, and we just basically use existing dispatch flow and the drivers to bootstrap us. So there's a lot of work can be easily picked up. Existing infrastructures, like I mentioned, Lyft has already built in a lot of experimenting infrastructure, data storage infrastructure. Piggyback on those was definitely a lot easier. Now, what are the constraints though in terms of building on the existing platform? Some of the things come to my mind were the conventions, right? So when you're on an existing platform, you have to be very careful about how to fit in the existing flow. Lyft has a brand, has an existing classic flow, line flow, and even the design has particular language, and we can't really break that easily. There still has to be some sort of a consistency experience on this platform. So when we're trying to innovate, there's certain boxes, boundaries that we have to retain us within. It definitely gives us certain constraints. But obviously for Lyft as a whole, it provides much better consistent experience. Also, being on an existing platform, we have to be more careful if there's any cannibalization. Meaning when we launch a new product, when we do experiment, there are possibilities it's hurting the core business, and we have to be more careful. That's experiments comes into play. And I'll talk about how experiment works later. Another question that people oftentimes ask in a product like Shuttle is, what is the right time to scale? Or it's often a time for a startup as well. Scaling or being able to scale is not free, and doing the trade-off when is the best time and how to do it is actually really hard. And a couple of things to be pointed out here: manual versus automation. So today, a lot of the flow that we have now is actually manual, and it was a very deliberate decision. We wanted to start very lean and just push out something really quick instead of devoting a lot of engineering time to build the perfect tool and perfect streamline just for something new. And other things like route editing, when we move a stop from one corner to another, today is pretty manual. It's not like a button that we can just press and they automatically jump. Configurations, we have some of the promotion things that we run for. We have some promotions that we run, for example, to get people use it, and the process of doing that today is still relatively manual. Actually, I think one of the audience asked, what do you mean by scale in this context? I think scale means scaling actually in two contexts. One is operationally and engineer-wise. How do we build the product or do we need to build the most scalable system, most scalable operational flow or engineering flow to enable this product? I don't know if that answers the question. Okay. Sorry, some of the questions goes back to the initial point. I would leave those towards the end if you don't mind asking again. So I wanted to, in this topic, when to scale, when to trade off or switching from manual to automation. I recently came across Brian from Airbnb or Airbnb CEO, have this quote, which I really like. And he was talking about how Airbnb started and how he scaled. He said, do manual things until too painful. Sounds very easy, sometimes can be very counterintuitive to engineers. But at least from my experience at Lyft or here with Shuttle, I see the value of start something simple and pushing out fast. Get the learnings as quickly as we can. Okay, another aspect of scale other than the operational side is infrastructure. When is the right time to think about moving from the simple infrastructure to the most scalable infrastructure? And there's a cost coming from the most scalable infrastructure. There's no absolute right answer to that, but I'll just name out some of the specific things that we do reflect some of our thinkings around like doing this trade-off. So one example is the route data model. We have the data structure we need some data structure or storage to store the route information. Where do we do that? There's many different options. The simplest one that you can go about is JSON config, right? You have a JSON file, JSON formatted file, you push it, and there's like very lean to do it. internally we have infrastructure to support that, pretty easy to piggyback on. And then the second one is some sort of structured data, so Dynamo, for example, which requires provision, things like that. And then the third one, if we're truly talking about scale, how do we do spatial search, for example? How can we handle millions of requests within the same second, for example? That goes beyond normal like Dynamo can support without like sophisticated caches, for example. So one thing that we started thinking is in future we could potentially leverage some of the more specific and unique database solutions for our particular use case. And I named this LMDB is something, or Lightning Memory Mapped Database Manager is something we definitely investigated, particularly suitable for this kind of scenario where you are very heavy in write, and then very heavy in reading and very light in writing the data, and a particularly good or well designed for spatial searches. And I think I covered the spatial search part, where if you could imagine the pipeline, there's one part that given a particular lat and long, or a set of lat and longs from the pickup and drop off, we need to find the closest stop, for example, or the most efficient route. So you could imagine like how can we find that? That involves spatial search in this 2D world, and incorporate this ETA, or estimation of time from one point to the other. The simplest solution to go with that is brute force, right? Like you look at all the stops, you either calculate the travel time, or even simplest is haversine, and then find the shortest one. The other one is doing some sort of spatial search, which can be much more sophisticated. Which one do we go first? As a very raw initial startup, we probably have 6, 7, 10 routes today. And if we break by region, it's even smaller. Then there's probably no need to start with very sophisticated spatial search, and we'll just do brute force. And at some point, we'll introduce much more efficient algorithm when it's needed. Okay, so I touched upon a few specific engineering or data challenges. I'll quickly talk about what are the product challenges in a product like this. In fact, it's not easy. If I see anything we deal with every day, product challenge is might to a certain extent overweight the technical challenge for a couple of reasons. One, I don't know if some folks in the audience know, but usually public transportation is very, very heavily subsidized. In United States, I think on average, it's 75% subsidized. So if you're paying like $2.50 for a bus ride, in fact, the operating cost for that is like $10. And the government is covering the rest with all the tax money. So the basically public transportation fare is particularly cheap, and even though we're not trying to subsidize it, and then but people have this concept of the public transportation or commuting solution tends to be cheaper. So breaking that, how do we build a product that's extremely efficient so then we can afford a very competitive and affordable price is particularly hard. There are a lot of other competitors in this space. Like Uber is definitely a well-known one, and some of the folks in the audience mentioned Via. That's another one. And if you're in San Francisco, you wouldn't know there's this company called the Chariot, which is also in this space. So a lot of people want to help solve this problem. So we have a lot of competitors. The last part I would mention is very specific to commuting. So commute is a very repeating behavior. People goes to work 5 days a week around the same time, going back around the same time. So oftentimes you have this habit being formed around your repeating behavior. One very concrete example, as a student you might not know, but there's this commuter benefit where your company pays for your, either pays or subsidizes certain level of your commute cost, and you have this card, or you put money on your Clipper card regularly or deduct from your paycheck. So breaking this kind of existing habit, which is already like very deeply tied to people, are extremely challenging. Like, how do we define a product that's so appealing, like 10 times better than your existing commute solution, so your habit will be basically detached, and you want to invest on this new product. So all those are product challenges. We are taking one step at a time and tackling it slowly. So after building, so we launched this product in March this year, and it's been 6 months. We've been extremely fast or quickly iterating on the product. And how do we iterate? Well, first of all, why do we have to iterate? By now you probably know it's an extremely hard problem to solve. A lot of challenges and a lot of unknowns as well. No one has really, dominantly solved that. It's a very complicated problem. So we're really building or learning as we're building. We have to act fast or extract out a lot of learnings of what we've built and how people react differently from certain features that we roll out. So then we can, provide the best experience. So how do we iterate? I would say experiments. Lyft is an extremely data-driven company. Almost all the big decisions that we make, we try to make sure there's a data to back it up. So we fully understand the implication of any decisions. So we have in-house experiment infrastructure that is extremely easy to use, but we can launch an experiment, have a hold up a group and a variant, and see how conversion behaves differently, how retention behaves differently, etc., or how efficiency outcome is. Oops, why is there a pool? Okay. So we heavily rely on experiment. We also oftentimes conduct user researches. Why we want to conduct user research, we want it to be very observing, right? We don't always can be the one that use our product day to day. So we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the passengers and observe how they use the product. We want to make sure we always listen or have the channel to listen to the feedback. So oftentimes we have in-house user research group to help us send out surveys to the passengers. We sometimes invite the passengers and drivers coming in the house to talk about their experiences, see the mocks that we have built, and or even directly tell us their feedback, or try out the prototype and give us direct feedback there. The third approach is actually very exciting. So we have dedicated city tours. Product team oftentimes can go into a tour in a different city and just to look how it's like. And this is something very unique for industry like us, where geographic different regions are very different in terms of local transportation, people's behavior, weather. So it's very different. From a virtual world, it's super helpful if the people who are building the product can actually experience a physical environment like that. So for example, my team or Shuttle team recently did a tour in Chicago, where we went to Chicago, we toured the city, try out public transportation there, try out Via as a competitor there, try out Uber, spend a lot of time with the driver. So those kind of first-hand information is extremely helpful for us. So field test, which is kind of similar but slightly different. We wanna, as an engineer team and product team, we wanted to make sure we're the one always can actually in a regular cadence try our own product. So Shuttle specific, we have this thing called bi-weekly team test run. So engineers and product and design, sometimes data science too, in this particular team would go out and just try out the product in real life by ourselves, and really imagine us as a passenger. And we take notes, we discuss the the pain points and take that backfill in our backlog or product prioritization. So the real experience is also important and also very exciting. Like when you in real world see how your own code work in action and analyze it at the field, it's pretty unique experience. So yeah, I hope by now you get a feel like it is just like a startup. Yes, I think Shuttle is pretty unique in a company at the size of Lyft. It's pretty self-contained, very early on, and a lot of experimenting wiggle room for us to try new stuff. So yeah, it's like a startup, and individuals in the team are particularly bonded. So I want to talk about how is this like to work in a startup within a sizable company, and this is my personal passion, or what I wanted to experience the most when I take this offer or decided to join Lyft or this particular team. I think some people have this stereotype or idea that if you join a sizable company, more than 500 people, say, you never get a startup experience. You always do tweak little things of the existing product. It might not be true. I think it differs team by team. What it means to be on a startup team within a sizable company, or how can you be happy, is, in my opinion, is you have to have a passion. This needs to be something that you personally feel passionate about. You have to have the ownership. This is not 9 to 5. You want to come in and feel like this is your own business. You should be very excited about faster iteration and are willing to make it happen. Similar with any startup in the world outside of the big company, is the only way for you to win is learn fast and okay with fail fast. The last thing I wanted to point out is, this is actually something that I recently learned or started realizing more and more, is as a startup, what's more important is what you learn. It's worse if you build the wrong thing. So like proving yourself, proving your hypothesis is more important than anything else. So this mindset of like hypothesis proving is very critical, at least in the context of a startup like Shuttle. So there's many questions.
I think there's a few good ones here.
Oh, okay,
Probably
sure.
want to cover.
I think this covers my core content. So we're going over to some of the questions. Sorry, which one?
How do I find the
how do I find
functionality?
Yeah. Yes. So this one's a little bit. I wish the answer is easier, but I don't know if you guys are going to see the slides later, but I have a mock here. Right now, the coverage of Shuttle is only in downtown San Francisco. So if you're outside of downtown, you will not see the option. And today is blended in this line option. So after you give your origin and destination, if you're matched to a route, it automatically pops up. So that's why many of the people haven't seen it. There's actually a reason behind it why do we do it this way. It goes back to one of my point of how the pro and the cons of building on the existing infrastructure, right? Lyft as a whole is the core business cannot be cannibalized, or we have to be very careful. So like exposure of a new product like this needs to be carefully handled. Someone asked, how do you incentivize drivers to participate in Shuttle given the low prices, the fact it happens in commute hour? It's an extremely good question. As of today, drivers get the same pay. Universally, Line, Classic, Shuttle, they get the same pay. So we price it cheap because we believe there's value for people to come back repetitively. Also, we believe that if we build the product right with all those knobs that we're introducing, we'll be able to operate much more efficiently to be able to support this affordable price, if that makes sense. Okay, one person asked, why do we choose San Francisco and Chicago at the, why do we choose San Francisco and Chicago at the first cities to implement Shuttle? There's many reasons behind it. The first thing we look at is probably density. We have to start with a city where density is there for a shared product like Shuttle, because the efficiency, like I mentioned, come from volume. Also, the people, I guess, passengers' general perception about shared rides, it's actually not that universal. So it's a lot easier to start with a city or region where the concept of shared rides, you get a car, you get into the car with someone that you don't necessarily know, could be new to other people. So starting with a region that people are very familiar with, that could be would be very helpful for us. Many questions. Sorry, try them reading. One audience asked, the performing in Chicago, many of the schools in Chicago are giving credit to students for the public transportation. Just curious about that. That's an extremely good question. So one thing as a Shuttle team are exploring is this partnership opportunity where, other than directly offering to passengers, we could partner with institutions like companies or schools to help solve their very specific transportation problem. How do you decide? Oh, very good question. Someone asked, how do you decide to stop an experiment to draw a conclusion? We do that all the time. It goes case by case, depends on the nature of the experiment. The tenure or the duration of the experiment varies differently. I'll give you a concrete example. If we only care about conversion, so like how people would make actions or request or not, if this is what we care the most, then the experiment can be a lot shorter. But if we care about retention, which is like how would whether people would come back or not, then it needs a little bit longer duration. Also, and the other thing that we, like in terms of how do we decide to stop, before we design the experiment, we always have the metrics being defined upfront. So we say this experiment, we care about conversions, and this is an improvement of conversion that we want to see. And then after the experiment being run, we do the analysis, and if it cannibalizes some of our existing metrics, then it's a no-go. A related question, someone asked, could you explain more on the metrics? How do we use that to improve the product? There are a lot of metrics. Many of them are actually industrial common. So things like conversion, retention, cancel rate, how many times people cancel, how many times drivers cancel, match efficiency, how efficiency the operations are. So we have a long list of metrics that we define. How do we use that to improve product? That's a little bit more general question, but we tends to define the metrics to reflect the healthiness of the system as well as a passenger experience. So things like retention is a direct reflection of how much people like it. We have one more metrics which is relatively unique to Shuttle. It's called a frequency, and what frequency measures is how many times people come back within a week. So in general, you can think 10 is like extremely good. They take 2 rides every day. But that's another indication of like how much people enjoy the service. Okay, cool. There are still some questions keep coming, but for the interest of time, I will hand over to Sway to talk about Lyft opportunities more specifically, which many of you guys are very interested about.
All right, well, thanks, Vivian, for the great talk on the Shuttle product. Hi, everyone. In the next section, I'm actually going to just talk about job opportunities at Lyft and why you want to actually work for us. And then, if you do want to actually work for us, what you want to expect. Now, again, we do see a lot of questions still coming in about Shuttle. We're trying to answer some of that in the overall Q&A section at the end. So, and then there's actually a lot of questions we skipped during Vivian's part. I see a lot of them about like, job positions, how we apply. I'm trying to cover some of that in my part. Okay, so before I dive into the Lyft specifics, I'd like to actually just maybe share some of my thoughts on how you actually want to choose your first job. My understanding is a lot of you in the audience today are actually new grads or people who are still in school. So I actually get asked this question a lot recently, now in part because my first job happened to be at Google. Now, a lot of people kind of assume that there was some secret sauce. That was actually how I actually kind of picked Google as my first job. Now, the reality was I didn't really know much about how big Google could become eventually. All I knew at that time was, well, Google built some product that I saw more and more of my friends actually became addicted to, and also the core business of Google in my case, it was actually related to my unfinished PhD work, which was in natural language processing. But guess what? So even though I thought hey, I can actually see myself contributing, my skills can actually be leveraged by Google, that was why I actually went there. Now, I ended up not doing anything natural language processing related. So from day one, I was actually converted to a server engineer, a general server engineer. So my point being, as a new grad, it's extremely difficult for you to know which company, which job is actually going to be optimal for you long term. Right, so I want people to actually think about, hey, you focus on learning as your first job. You focus on learning, not necessarily earning part. Now, the reality is, even if your first company becomes hugely successful, as Google did, as Facebook did, as a new grad, the sad reality is you're probably not going to get too much out of it, both in terms of financial return and in terms of your career building or sort of your ownership. So it's just really too early for you to actually optimize for those things. So I really think a lot of people spend a huge amount of time really comparing different opportunities and then trying to look for very definitive answer, to actually make one or maybe a few opportunities kind of stand out. I honestly think you don't want to waste that time. So just focus on two things. One is hey, whether this particular job opportunity could actually allow you to learn things to become a better self, right? So this could be an engineer. It could be if you're in product, does the job offer you those opportunities? That's number one. Now, number two, I want people to really think about, so to understand yourself, understand what you really want, right? So everybody's different. A great opportunity for one person can actually be a terrible option for somebody else. Now, think about whether you want to find just a job or whether you actually want to actually have passion or actually build a career there. Now, if you're in the former category, which there's nothing wrong with that, many people just find a job. Now, you might want to sort of prioritize the more established companies where you can actually have a fairly stable environment. You can actually really learn a lot from other folks. You can actually have great work-life balance. It's completely okay for people to start there. Now, on the other hand, there are people who just never want to work for other people. It's more about having their own ideas executed. And then those people, maybe the startups are slightly better choices. And also look at your own technical skills. Do you see yourself being a generalist long term, or do you see yourself really trying to focus on one thing and then doing really, really deep, doing really well there? Again, the society or companies need both talents. As a generalist, you can probably find many companies, many teams that can leverage your skill sets. Specialists are always appreciated, in certain jobs. And the takeaway message I want you to sort of get from this particular slide is there's really no correct or wrong choice. What matters is you actually make a choice and you make the most out of it. All right, so now let me switch gear to talk about Lyft specifically. Now, why Lyft? I want to really kind of say three things. First, on the technology side, I believe most of the audience here is actually sort of having technical background. On the technology side, we are working on cutting edge technologies. I'm sure everybody noticed this. In the last couple years, there's actually an explosion. There's an explosion of new technologies. Virtual reality, self-driving cars or AI in general, just to name a few. Now, Lyft, besides being one of the most important players on the frontier of these new technologies, we are actually applying these technologies to solve real-life problems. So as Vivian mentioned, you can really see your work really live and used in production by so many people. So not only that we're actually sort of onto these new technologies, we're applying them to solve problems that was never tackled by other technology companies in the past. So now on the business side, I want you guys to know that we're in a very, very big market. To share some stats, in the US alone, there's $2 trillion every year spent on public transportation. Now, out of that $2 trillion, ride sharing, which is basically Uber and Lyft combined in the US market, only represents a very tiny percentage. Now, it's much, much smaller percentage than public transportation. So we're talking about a country where public transportation gets complained by everybody, right? Like essentially in many major cities, there's literally no public transportation, yet the money spent on public transportation every year just totally outweighs, the spending on ride sharing at this moment. So my message is this is this particular market has huge growth potential, and we're still in very early days. Now, Lyft's position in this market is, we've been experiencing explosive growth, for the last couple of years, and then, the other good thing to realize is we're actually managing the company. We're running the company in a very sustainable and responsible fashion. Now, I can go over some of the details in the Q&A session if you're interested. What I mean by responsible execution there. Finally, on the timing side, I do think right now is the good time to actually join Lyft. We're at 500 engineers. So this is not tiny, this is not small anymore. So we're not scrappy anymore. That's why it's big enough for us to give a lot of focus, give a lot of emphasis on having good process, on having good engineering cultures. Now, on the other hand, this is not big, right? This is not too big for us to actually spend too much time with interdependencies or people blocking each other, and your personal impact can be directly felt. All right, so now moving on to maybe, I think many people ask the specific question, what opportunities exist for internships and new grad? First of all, we do hire interns. We do have a pretty solid new grad program. I want to highlight some of the, some of the things you should sort of expect, as an intern or as a new grad, applicant. At Lyft, we don't actually make that much of a difference whether you're an intern or whether you're a new grad versus a more senior engineer. We actually give ownership, we give autonomy to all these people. Now, what comes with that is also accountability, right? So even as an internship, you're expected to actually own or be a major part of some critical project. We want you to, so even the internship is a couple months, we're going to find things that we believe can be finished, can be completed within that time frame, and we will hold you accountable for actually shipping that product. So this does give everybody, interns and new grad included, full ownership. Now, not everything is necessarily suitable for interns for new grad, but we make explicit choices to make sure that new grad and interns are sort of treated like a senior person. And on top of your direct manager, we are actually finding everybody, every intern, every new grad, a mentor and a buddy, so they can actually sort of kind of get inputs from multiple people. For the last couple of years, our conversion rate for our internship, so interns becoming full-timers, interns accepting our return offers, has been extremely high. More than 3/4 of our interns ended up being full-time at Lyft. Just quickly mention, we prefer that people here actually apply through BitTiger. We have very strong partnership connection with BitTiger. We actually get frequent download of all the all the leads, all the sources that BitTiger is collecting for us, and applying through BitTiger would actually guarantee kind of prompt response from our side, and we can actually attribute that to BitTiger. Now this slide is probably kind of answers most of the questions here. So we do have a lot of internship and new grad positions, but we do not have that for every single role. So here I'm listing 5 roles. Engineering, that's basically software engineering that has server, that covers server, iOS, Android, front end, you name it, all different roles within software engineering. That's the first line there. And then we do have analytics position. We have data scientist position, PMs, and also design. Now, everything is open for internships. Only engineering and analytics are hiring for new grad. Okay, yes, we do sponsor international students. There's many people on working visas here. I just saw that question coming in. No worries about that. A question coming in, what is data science? So currently the data science program at Lyft, these are people with usually like math or statistics background. They're usually pretty skillful in terms of machine learning. So data science used to own most of the machine learning models at Lyft. Now we're changing that to actually encourage more software engineers to also co-own like the models we're building. I'll actually get back to some of the questions later. Let me show you the one last slide. So this gives an overview of our org structure. So this is within Lyft engineering. Now, very quickly on the high level, I think, you can imagine like, Lyft being organized into 10 different big orgs. So we do have 2 horizontal layers at the bottom, which is infrastructure and platform. A quick word on the difference between platform and infrastructure. Infrastructure are mostly like functional teams. They do not have product managers. So they're building like the building blocks. They're building the most basic services for the rest of the company. At a platform layer, you're starting to see full stack teams. Platform teams usually have their own business goals, but at the same time, the solutions they're building are also serving the rest of the company. They're building platform solutions for the rest of the product engine world. On top, we have 4 areas. PAC stands for passenger, driver, MAP is marketplace, and autonomous platform. So again, before autonomous stuff, this area used to be just dealing with marketplace. Marketplace is where supply meets demand. So this org actually works on things like calculating ETA, pricing, how we match drivers with passengers, how we do dispatch, how we do routing. And actually, Vivian's team, the Shuttle team, is part of the map world. Now we have extended the marketplace, the core business, into autonomous, and that's because a lot of the technologies we need to use to empower autonomous vehicles, these devices that we use to actually kind of take videos, like do images on the road, they're directly applicable to our core business. So MAP again stands for marketplace and autonomous platform. And finally, we have a team of engineers focusing on growth. Now on the side, there's 4 like special functions. Data eng/BI being one of them. Data science, as you can see, is independent organizationally. Now, day to day, they're embedded with other product eng teams. And we also have security as a separate team. And then there's a team of TPMs. These are technical program managers, people who are good at coordinating complex projects that involve cross teams and cross org. So I believe this is what we have for everybody. And I think, yeah, we're ready for general Q&A. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for kind of staying with us. This is Vivian again. So,
thank you so much, Siwei and Vivian. Really appreciate your time. Do you want me to go through some questions, or would you both?
Yeah, that would be good. If you can sort of help,
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free to reach out direct. Feel free to answer any questions that I don't cover, of course.
Okay.
Let's see. There's a lot of specific. I've seen a lot about experienced engineers. We have an application form now that covers intern and new grad. Obviously, we're unable to put every single open engineering position on there. So how would you suggest that some of the more experienced attendees tonight apply at Lyft?
Well, so I guess in terms of how we apply, I don't think we need to necessarily have a different process. I do prefer that they all go through BitTiger, and if on the BitTiger side you guys can help us filter, that will be useful. Now, with experienced candidates, I do want to I want people to actually give us a little bit more about themselves, like their experience and specifically what teams, what big orgs they like to contribute to. So in that case, my last slide there, talking about the different org structure here, it will be useful for people to actually map their skills to one of those. Like that way, it will help us kind of route, to the right hiring, managers and recruiters.
Perfect. So if you're interested in an experienced position, just select new grad on the application form. You already have your professional experience there, and we'll have a question for you to explain what organization you'd like to be a part of.
Yeah. Now there's a question in the QA window saying, is this hiring only for the shuttle team or for all departments? We're definitely hiring for almost all engineering departments and all other functions as well. I listed engineering, analytics, data science, product management, and the design. So this is for hiring into all. We just picked Shuttle as a showcase today. So thanks for that clarification question.
There's a question about Shuttle. Will you implement Shuttle in small cities, or will that be mainly in the larger cities?
We definitely have, the ultimate goal, North Star, is cover anywhere there's people living, there's transportation. So we definitely do not want to limit us into big cities. In fact, we're building actively on features that would unlock those low density areas. For example, batching, where we give you a schedule so you can think of the service become less frequent, but at least you have the ability to get on the car through our service. So I guess the straight answer is no, we don't want to limit us.
I want to actually take two questions that just kind of came in. One of them is, what do you expect for a product from a product design intern? I do not have a great answer for that, in part because I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question right here. So in this case, if we can we actually record this particular question? So and I like to actually follow up offline.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, cool. So
yeah, absolutely.
The next question, what are the necessary skills of data engineer? Now for that, I advise people to go to lyft.com/jobs. There's actually job description for many different roles. Now specifically for data people, so within engineering, there's probably like two positions that are relevant. There's one called data engineer, and there's another one called software engineer, SWE with data infrastructure focus. So a lot of different companies, use these two terms interchangeably. By just seeing data engineer, I'm actually not certain which one this particular person is asking about. So, but go to the lyft.com/jobs. We actually have very detailed job description for both of them. I suspect people who are caring about data engineer might find software engineer data infrastructure also interesting.
I see a few here. One is about Lyft's vision of the self-driving car. And another question, which I think could be addressed by both of you, is what is the most important lessons and skills that you learned from your first job?
All right, I really like that question. So let me try to answer the autonomous stuff. What specifically is the question?
Let's see the question. What is Lyft's vision about self-driving cars?
I see. So, all right. So I think the answer I want to give is I'll actually ask Vivian to actually sort of tell us more about how that ties into your world. But first of all, we do believe that is the trend. We believe that's the future, and that's gonna fundamentally change the operation efficiency of our business. So Lyft must have a position in autonomous. Now we do also understand we're in very, very early stage of autonomous. It is not part of our core business yet, right? So this is the part that we want to invest. We want to do a lot more. We want to make sure that we have a strong footprint. We're not making, like, most of our core business metrics are not tied to autonomous yet. Now, I also want to share in autonomous, there's really like three layers. There's actually like the bottom layer is actually the OEM, the actual car manufacturing. The middle layer is what we call the brain, the AI part, the technology that empowers these cars to drive themselves. And then there's the platform, which is basically the systems, the service that connects people with these cars. Now, Lyft has been in the platform business for many years, and I think we're one of the major players there. Lyft is not going into the manufacturing layer, so we do partner with a lot of car manufacturers to actually, so like we think the auto manufacturers are much better equipped than we are to actually handle that work. Now we do want to actually invest heavily into the AI layer. Now we're doing this to actually empower more and more players to all contribute to this layer. So this is not about domination. We think through our investment, through our participation, through open sourcing some of our technologies, we can encourage big and small players to all participate in the AI layer. Again, 3 layers. We are one of the major players for the platform. We're starting huge investment into the AI layer, and we're leaving the OEM, the car manufacturing, to other companies. Do you want to add a few things about how this might affect, Shuttle? I think you covered some of that in your talk.
Yeah, sure. I'll just touch it briefly, but you could imagine what is the best form to deploy self-driving car. It will likely going to be some of the things that's like pre-configured. So Shuttle definitely have a very interesting and unique synergy with self-driving use case. And it will also bring extremely values when, we've figured out this most efficient solution for a particular use case. And then when self-driving is ready, technically, then we'll be ready to deploy on this audience or passenger group that's already formed the behavior. So it'll be particularly interesting to see how autonomous driving technology really advances in near future.
Do you want to take a first stab at what's the biggest thing you learned?
Oh, that's actually I'll take a little bit more time to think about it. Why don't you go first?
Right. So in my case, again, I worked for Google and Twitter prior to this. Both were actually much bigger companies, and I actually see myself comfortable with a big environment. When I came to Lyft, I was actually telling my friends that this is probably the smallest company. If it's smaller than Lyft at the time, which was 2 years ago, that would probably be a little too risky for me now. But what I did sort of learn was, we as engineers over time, when you talk about your own growth, your sort of skill set expansion, do not think about only one dimension, right? So do not just think about you can actually get deeper into some technologies, or you can actually handle more technologies at the same time. You can work on different projects. Sometimes there's a lot of other dimensions. In my case, the reason I came to Lyft was precisely because it actually offered me the opportunity to work with other functions. So today I have to, in my work, I have to deal with, a lot of folks from sales, from BD side, from operations. They're very different. They're very different from, the tech people. They're very different from how product managers think. So so most engineers are probably familiar with how to sort of interact with product managers, but much less so about how to deal with other functions. So again, I did take a risk 2 years ago. It was a very much different story. I'm happy to see how Lyft has panned out, in the last 24 months. But this experience, the more diverse opportunities here, actually was the biggest learning that I got. And I really, really encourage people to think that way. Now, some people, you guys are maybe 100% passionate about, doing technology. You always see yourself as a technology person. Yes, in Silicon Valley, or in the US in general, there's a lot of, great opportunities, companies for you to go deep into technology. Now, but if you're not one of those, if you actually kind of value other skill sets, whether it's communication, coordination, product, you name it, you can find many, many opportunities that can leverage your skill sets, which is wider, possibly kind of, less deep in any particular area, but you will be able to actually find those.
I'll add something slightly different. So my first job is Microsoft, which is a much, much more established company. And I definitely do not have a very deep insight of what I wanted as my career. What Microsoft taught me the most is probably the rigor and the scale. So I joined Microsoft as Excel for web, part of the whole Office organization, and we're aiming for enterprise solutions. So everything is extremely rigor. Microsoft also, kind of similar to Google, have very mature software development processes. Some of the infrastructure internal tool was pretty sophisticated. So for that was, I personally think, a good intro to the industry. And I was lucky enough to work with some of the legendary engineers who spent 20 years in Microsoft. So they've seen through how a giant really grown. So although towards the end, I came to realize that was what, like the pace and the particular problem was not what I personally feel passionate about. So then I decided to move on. So I think what I'm trying to make a point here is it's very common as a new grad, you don't know what exactly you would get or you wanted to get for your first job. I think do the research as you can, pick the first one, learn as much as you can. Anywhere will give you some learnings. At the same time, keep an open mind and self-reflect frequently to see if you get the learning, the growth that you want. If this is not what you've been, excited about every day, wake up to go to work, then it's not bad, or like it's pretty common for you to think about the next job. So be active in that aspect too.
I know a few people were asking about the how to apply. We will be sending out a link. We have all of your email addresses. Look at the one that you used to register for this talk, and we will be sending out the link tomorrow morning. And you will get many of the details then. There was another question about the differences between data scientists and data analysts. What are the major differences there between those two positions?
Well, so I don't want to really draw the line between those two roles, because I do see people having like skill sets on both sides. For a real formal definition, I encourage people to go to lyft.com/jobs, and I think it's clearly spec out there now. To give sort of my layman definition, or to sort of tell the difference, the data analysts work much more closely with the business side. So they're essentially serving as the bridge between the end product world and then the actual business stakeholders. This could be operations, this could be sales, could be finance, could be even HR, depending on which team you're actually working on. So essentially, the data analysts are using, what's available, the data that's being generated, being logged. They're using like the systems built by the end product side, but then they're doing analysis to turn things into business intelligence for the business stakeholders, for the other function that they serve. Now, data science is, on the other hand, much closer to the end product world. So they're doing analysis, they're building the models to affect product decisions.
Great. I think we maybe have time for one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. In any final words?
By the way, I do want to give some answer to the IPO question. I know it's probably on many people's mind. I don't want to avoid it. Now, obviously, we cannot comment on the IPO timeframe. What I can share is we're definitely trying to get our business. We're definitely trying to get our execution to be public ready. Now, this means a lot of things. On the technology side, this means much more rigor in terms of how we deal with security, compliance requirements, data access, permission, so on and so forth. And then essentially, as we move closer to being public, the requirements, again, the rigor, like the process checking, these things become a lot more serious. So there are teams, there are projects on each team working specifically towards that. But we do not have a timeline right now that we can share. Thanks.
Thank you, Vivian and Sue. Really appreciate your time. If you want to pick another one, and we'll wrap up with one final. There was one about what do you two like most about working at Lyft? That might be one, or if you guys want to self-select one from the list, absolutely, that'd be great.
I like some of these questions, actually. Some of them are pretty challenging. Let me see if there's anyone that's different from the other things we talked about. Can we have you guys on LinkedIn? Just search our names. You will be able to find us. Happy to connect on LinkedIn. There's a question about, I already got offer from both Uber and Lyft. Which one should I choose now? You have my obvious answer, but again, even in this forum, I like to tell people, don't blindly follow what other people say or do. Really ask yourself why for each one. Again, there's no solution that fits all. Right, so depending on what you want, Uber is obviously a great company. They're a a really, really great competitor. And I think the competition really makes the whole market improve. And like a lot of the new features from both sides are a direct result of the competition. We don't consider them just as a competitor. There's a lot of things we share with them as well. And also, by the way, I don't know who actually asked that particular question. For senior hires, for experienced hires, a lot of times, the way I would select my job opportunities would actually be trying to understand what they are hiring you for. Like, is that position specifically made for you, or are you one of the general hires? Now, for new grad, for interns, that may not matter that much. But as you grow more experienced, having the position, having the more detailed the expectations are, the better. Like, what you want to avoid as you grow your career is you want to avoid being hired always as a commodity.
Great.
All right.
Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you so much, Vivian. Sue, Director of Platform Engineering at Lyft. Vivian is the Engineering Manager on Shuttle at Lyft. Fantastic presentation. I know I learned a lot. Just for everyone, all of the attendees, another reminder that the application form will be released tomorrow morning, and it will be collected next Tuesday, October 24th. So you'll have the chance to upload your resume, put in your LinkedIn profile, make sure those are all good to go, and then you'll upload all that information and it'll be sent directly to Lyft. And thank you so much for attending this event and for Lyft support. We really appreciate it, and we hope everyone has a great night.
Well, thank you, Eric. It's really nice to be here, and thank you everybody for staying so late for our talks. Hopefully, to an extent.
All right. Well, we are definitely looking forward to the next one. Vivian? Oh, all right. Bye, everybody.